Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pedophile Huntress. Tonight, Joann and I are here with one common goal, that you be encouraged in heart and united in love. Joann's been with us before. You could hear her entire story. It's on both the podcast, all of the stations, and also on my YouTube channel. Joann's written a book called Taking a Different Path, Finding Joy in the Journey. And the interesting thing, on the back of her book, she writes, "This is my story, and I believe that this is just the beginning of my journey." And I wanted to talk about that because I think I really just wanted to bring Joann on and give her some love tonight. Through that, spread the love. There's this beautiful scripture that I wanted to start with that's in Isaiah 40, and Isaiah 40 says, "Comfort, comfort my people, says the Lord your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that for her sins she's been paid. Oh, sorry, that her sin has been paid for and that she has received from the Lord's hand double." I just thought that was such a beautiful thing. I think often there's another scripture that says your warfare has ended. And I think sometimes we've been battling since we were young, right? And I thought it was such a beautiful scripture when I was kind of talking to the Lord before we started. I just heard that scripture, Isaiah 40. And really, Joanne, it is sometimes it's time when God says it's time for the warfare just to stop. Like I want to give you back double for all the trouble. So, bringing the listener into this story, this is Joanne with me tonight. Joanne starts her book, and I just want to go back for those of you that don't know the story. It's good to come into her story. Um, and she starts with, let me go back a little bit farther. I wasn't back enough far enough back. In chapter one, it's called Tarnished Treasure. Her book is very good. You should get it and read it. She says at 5, I was molested by a male friend. And then she goes on to say somewhere between 5 and 11, another family friend that I was entrusted to babysit with began molesting me as well. And then she goes on and says, we moved into a city when I was 11. Others started molesting me as well. Then a few paragraphs down, she said dad was abusive and mom was in her own little world. And then skip some words. And then she says, I'm estranged from my siblings at the time of writing this book, and I do not see this changing anytime soon. And now I feel as if I'm an orphan. For the listener that doesn't know, Joanne also has been recently widowed. I thought it was just so interesting. I try to prepare and really bring to these my heart, my soul, my mind, my spirit, and listen and give to the listener and the person here kind of a legacy of hope. And Joanne, I just feel like I wanted to start there with you and just talk about that kind of orphan spirit and how you think maybe it's with you, maybe it's not with you. I'm estranged from my siblings. It often happens in family, but that's all of what I just said was in the length of about 10 paragraphs. That's wild. I mean, we skip over this, but then, it's like we don't go home. Well, we'll get into that. I just want to stop right there and talk about that. I feel as if I'm an orphan. Talk about that a little bit with us.
Um, for me, it kind of started when I realized that I didn't adhere to the same value systems as my mother and my siblings. And it was kind of like dad and I on one front, and my siblings and my mom on the other front. And mom did everything she could to drive that divisive line. I was asked all the time, what is wrong with me? Why do you always have to talk about things like this? Why do you have to talk about things? Can't you just shut up? Can't you just stay silent? And it was like there was a driving desire in me to be different than what I knew. And I can't tell you how many times, I mean, even dad did it sometimes, like if you have an opinion and I don't share it, you don't have an opinion. And there was always this little voice inside of my head that just said, that's not right. That's not right. And,
Mhm.
God gave me a voice for a reason. God gave you a
Right,
voice for a reason.
right.
And I believe that we are those strongholds that are able to reach past what we've been through so that we can help other people because we know what it's like. And my siblings and my mom, the only time they helped people was when it made them look good. You know, that
Right.
little
Oh,
halo up there.
yeah. Oh, yes.
And I'd rather wear my horns and have my halo tipped off of it than be so judgy and so self-righteous
Mhm.
and so Betty better than you. I have never thought I was better than anyone. And even though I don't care much for my siblings and my mother, I'm still not better than anyone. You know what I mean? I make
Mhm.
better choices, better decisions. I care more for other people. And, but yeah, I have never felt like, and you know, it's not just with my family, it's with so
Mhm.
many others. I've never felt like I fit in because I'm so ultimately different. And I think that's by design. And I think so many times, though, that people forget to honor that part of themselves and then they end up not happy.
And I wonder now, I'm going to challenge that just a little bit because now I have a heart that sought truth all the time. And trust me, nobody liked it in my family. I could see what kind of prigs my parents really were, but I couldn't do anything about it because I was a child.
Right.
However, I wonder, Joanne, too. I mean, I knew Joanne in school, so I've known Joanne a really long time. I mean, like way back. And you were always kind and you were always welcoming. I think sometimes this abuse started very young for you. It started very young for me. At that moment, the only thing I want to challenge is at that moment we start feeling different, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I have always found like felt like a round peg in a square hole or a square peg in a
Mhm.
round hole or a I don't know, you know what I mean? But I've never felt like I fit anywhere. And
Mhm.
that different thing though, once you honor that and start to blossom and bloom into it, it really changes you from the inside out.
Right.
And
Well, yeah, go ahead.
and I think you're right. You know, those of us who have been through the types of things that we have been through, we know true pain. We know what it's like to feel like that square peg in the round hole. We know what it's like to feel ostracized, not wanted, not valued. And so we exude that kindness because we know what it's like to not have it.
It's very true. And the truth is that when you are touched as a child by these childhood sexual crimes, you are different. You are no longer the same. You know, it'd just be like getting in a car wreck. You're going to not be the same because you're going to have that trauma. Now, if that car wreck left you without a limb, that's going to follow you for the rest of your life. And I do think childhood crimes, no matter how much we go to counseling and we try, there's residual effects left with us. And what I try to do in my life, and I know you do as well, is honor that. Because if I was left without a limb, well, I might be able to get along very well without that. I'm still going to not have a limb, right?
Right. And you're right, there is also spiritual ramifications of those types of things. We become marked and the
Mhm.
enemy realizes that. And you know,
Absolutely.
and it's I, you know, did a whole bunch of research on that and it was like freaky, like how that really happens. Like they can spot you like a mile away, kind of like in the
Yes.
animal kingdom when the female is you know, ready to, yeah, anyway, you know what I'm saying. But yeah,
No,
it's
I
just
do. I think I'd like you to talk about that for a little bit, though. It's something that we haven't really talked about on this podcast, but I hear so many people say that it's like I had a target on my back after I was first molested. I
yeah,
also think that pedophiles, I do think there's a spiritual aspect. I'm hugely an Ephesians 6 girl. I fight with weapons that do not exist in this world because I believe that I belong to a kingdom that doesn't exist here, right? And so I fight that way. I do feel like we're in a war. And I also think that pedophiles are dark, Joanne. That I don't think that you can do what these people do to children without having giving over a piece of yourself or a lot of yourself to the dark kingdom. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? So they have kind of an influence with them that helps them know what children to target and possibly children who've already been targeted. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, they do. It's like, like I said, in the animal kingdom, when the male tomcats can smell the female tomcats. It's kind of like that, only it's in a spiritual sense. And it
Hmm.
is a physical, not a physical marking, but it's a spiritual marking. And they just know it I don't know, it's kind of like a magnet. They're drawn to this child, and because they know that they've already been, or they're either in the process of being groomed, or they're groomed enough to where they're um the word is not coming to me, but when they're ready to, be violated against, or and it's, like I said, I did some research on it. It was one of the creepiest things that, and again, having had it happen to me, I'm like, how did they know? And then later
Hmm.
years, having done the research and finding out that it is, it's actually spiritual.
Hmm.
And I mean, it just must be that dark presence
Well, yeah,
that,
and right, I really think it is. People don't like to look at a spiritual world. I think that America is the least good at looking at spirituality, although there are really good churches who I just listened to this really cool. My girls are actually still in Portland. I'm in Montana, but they go to this really cool church, which Portland is an incredibly dark area. It's like hell opened up and just kind of made residents there because everybody allows it. But anyway, he
right.
was talking about that as well. And we are in a spiritual battle, and these things genuinely know things, right? Like demons know things just like God's angels know things, just like God knows things. And so when you, and again, Joanne, I really think, and I've said it and I'll say it till the day I go back to God, it's a perfect crime of hell because you begin to destroy people before they even have a sense of who they are. Children have been violated. They have now these wounds that carry with them. They don't know their sexuality is broken. So often, are you really gay, or was it because you were hurt and molested as a child by a same-sex person, and that was the thing that first sparked your sexual interest? So, I mean, it is a perfect crime of hell, right? And so I think the other thing that I wanted, is there anything else you wanted to say about that before we move on? Because certainly do, since you did some research, but I really do 100% believe that it is a perfect crime of hell.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Right. So one of the things that I noticed as I went through your book was that there is this theme, and I recognize this theme. We are either numb or cut off, but there is this place in your book where you talk about emotions are the journey that begins to heal us. But emotions are not easy, Joanne. So I have a line in my book where I talk about keeping emotions in a tool belt. And when I would come upon a situation in life, I'd think, oh God, what emotion would I use here? Because I was dead. I was dead because how could I survive? Right. I mean, I couldn't survive living in my parents' house and having my brother rape me as a teenager and all these things. So I didn't really feel anymore. Can you talk about that a little bit?
A lot of times, and I would like to address this as well as medication, because medication numbs us.
Mhm.
And that is a very worrisome thing for me, because I know, and I think that you can't heal from it until you address it. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying, please do not, I'm not a doctor, please do not stop your medication if you're on it. Um, but it does numb you. And I know that sometimes that's done to help you. If the feelings are too extreme, then you obviously need to slow that down. But I have always found that no matter how hard those feelings and emotions were, that I needed to feel them. I needed to
Mhm.
go back. And the other thing is, I found about these emotions is when you're younger, such as when you and I both started being abused, there was so many, we didn't have words to explain
Right.
how we felt. We didn't have um, someone to come alongside and, oh, you must be feeling wounded and hurt. We didn't have those tool belts or those people to come along, because we weren't able to talk about it. I know, I remember, even in the 6th and 7th grade, talking to somebody, and I was called a liar. I was told that that didn't happen. And
Is that
so I started to
crazy?
shut my prison. Yeah, it's like, okay, just because you don't, and I'm facing the same thing now as a widow. People that didn't know my husband are judging and shaming me, because we lived as roommates for the last 7, 8 years. And so, do I miss him? No, not really. We were just roommates. Some things had happened and I had clocked out of the marriage. I didn't ever cheat because I know that that's on me. But people are saying, don't talk about your husband this way. Okay, just because you don't know what went on inside of my home doesn't change the fact that it happened to me. And we can say the same thing about our childhood sexual abuse. It's,
Hmm.
you may not like it, or you may not understand it, or you may not have ever dealt with that type of a situation, but it doesn't be any less real to me and to you just because you don't understand it, you know
Well,
and
exactly. Right. I think you hit on a lot of things there, but I think it's interesting to me that it's easy for people to say. There are millions of people who've been hurt by childhood sexual crimes. That's easy for people to say, oh, millions of people have been hurt and molested, blah, blah, blah. However, when that story becomes personal, and Joanne, we're right next to him, that is nowhere that anybody wants to stand. And I
yeah,
don't I don't know if I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think sometimes it's the denial in their own life. But don't
I
you see
agree.
that all the time? Like people want to live in this weird, I'm going to create a good story. I'm going to tell that story. And then I don't want to stand by people who don't just tell a good story because you make me uncomfortable, right?
Okay. And yes, that's very true. But the reality is, as long as you are lying to and denying your story, you are
Right.
causing yourself harm and wounding yourself further. I have found, okay, and again, going back to my marriage, I was dishonest. I mean, it's not like I'm going to go out there and smash my husband and tell the story of the things that I think he did or didn't do or should have done, could have done, would have done. But the bottom line is I felt like a liar because I wasn't
Right.
honoring my story. And like I said, it's not my job to make him look bad, and to smash him. That's not my job, because I believe that God knows. God knows what happened. God knows what happened to you. God knows what happened to me. And whether people agree or like it, it doesn't change that fact. And
No,
once
and
you
go ahead, keep
stand up
going.
on that, and
Hmm.
once you embrace that, and you kind of become invincible a little bit.
Well, you do, but let's dissect that a little bit, what you said, because something that you said is really important. So I remember having this other girlfriend. She'd come stay with me in high school. She loved my dad, like she loved my dad. My father was raping me at the same time that she came to our house, and this is in high school. So years later, when I decided to tell in my 20s, she didn't believe me. And she said, I was at your house. You guys had a good house. Like I liked your dad. He was funny. My mom ran a Bible study. So part of this, the dilemma is learning to believe yourself,
Exactly.
understanding why you didn't tell the truth at the time, and being graceful with yourself because it's hard. A lot of these patterns just continue in our lives, right? So we started that as children. We kind of made believe that life was better than it was, even though you and I did not receive the comfort we should have as children. And then,
100%.
right? And then what happens is we find ourselves in these scenarios again, like you're talking about with your husband. So, like, even in your book, you talk about, your husband always being there for your children and that sort of thing. But the truth is, I believe both places can be true. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he was a good man. He was. He was a weak man, and he made terrible choices, and he made excuses for those choices. And I am one of those people. I'm like, seriously, okay, you made a choice. I'm okay, I'm old school. I am old school. You made a choice. This isn't an addiction. This isn't cute. It's not funny. No, you made a choice. And that choice, hurt me, and possibly others or whatever in those situations, you know what I mean? But I'm just no nonsense, like seriously, I don't have time for this, and so yeah, I clocked out of the marriage, and we lived, like I said, as roommates. And He was a good man though, and I wasn't negating that. I never did. He took on myself and my three boys, which I gotta say was a lot. Capital
Mhm.
A, capital LOT, a lot. I
Boy, can
wasn't
I
healed,
relate to that.
right? I wasn't healed when we got together, and there was a lot of trials and errors. And, I mean, as far as that goes, he was a good husband. He was. But there were just some other things that were just like too much, you know? And again, for us standing up for what we'll tolerate and what we won't, and having that choice, Jody. Oh
It's
my goodness.
huge,
As a
right?
child, we lost our choice.
We
We
did.
didn't get to say, I mean, we
Yep.
said it. I know I did. I said, stop, that hurts. Ow. I said all the right things, but we weren't given a choice and they didn't listen because we were
Right.
children. And
Exactly.
that's really uncool. But I think also in your way and in my way, we became defenders of children. I
Right.
know I did. I know I
And
absolutely did.
defenders of ourself though, too, right?
You
And
have
so
to. Yes.
your husband died unexpectedly. Do you think that this gave you the opportunity just to be kind of walk freer, or because you were still the same person. This is what people understand, is whether you talked about it or not, you're still the same person, right? Your heart was the same. I know you. I know your heart was the same living with him, but now you're speaking about it because he's not here. So I get that. And it's kind of, it correlates to why people won't talk about abuse at all, or betrayals, or any of those things, even in childhood, because people are alive. It's going to make all these issues. It's going to make problems. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So you mean why I didn't talk about my husband?
Yeah, when he was alive.
Um, I I was processing so many things and finding the link between um the things that happened to me as a child and me also allowing other forms of abuse
Hmm.
was it was I was on that rabbit trail, or the habit trail, the little wheel,
Oh, yes.
and it's an ever evolving process. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
And,
Yes.
and so and how do you define abuse sometimes?
Hmm.
Like, my husband never ever said an unkind word. I can tell you, he never ever said an unkind word in 30 years. He never raised his hand to me. He never raised his voice to me. He was never unkind. He was, but there were other things that I guess you just don't talk about. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And that's his story. And trying to hold that fine line between how what he did affected me and what to share and what not to share. And as abused people, we struggle with that boundary of
Yes, we
what
do.
should I share, what shouldn't I share, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate.
Hmm.
And also
Right.
now, yes, I am free and he is gone. And again, I'm not here to sully his reputation. Men struggle with things that women don't struggle, porn, for example.
Right.
And that is something that I, as a female, do not understand. I mean,
Hmm.
I think God made the bodies beautiful, but I don't spend all my time looking at them. I have better things to do with my time, whereas men are visually stimulated, you
Right.
know. So there's that. But yes, I am free. And again, now is and also as a mother, as a wife, mother, daughter,
Hmm.
cousin, yada yada yada, the list goes on. I
Right.
find that I am finally not obligated to anyone else for any kind of care except myself. Well, and
Right.
except right here, my little doggy.
I
She's
love
not.
it. No, I love it. And I think though that this is all part and parcel, because one of the
Can you see
things, um,
her?
oh, it's sweet. One of the things about a continual growth pattern in life is you change. Like you meet people and you think your tolerance is different, and you what you think, and I can say this for myself. I've been with many people that I didn't think were that abusive when I got with them, but I stayed in counseling for 20 years, and the more I'd grow, the more I'd think, "Oh my God, what the hell am I doing here?" You know what I
It's
mean? And
not. your eyes.
Excuse me?
It's an ever opening of your eyes. It's like you
The
think, oh yeah, I've got this, and then you're like,
yes.
but wait. And that's when you either need to decide to take the bull by the horn and say, okay, I'm expressing boundaries here, and I'm not tolerating this, and and again, that is showing self-love. And a lot of us abuse people really struggle with showing ourselves self-love,
Right,
and
right.
also realizing that setting boundaries and being healthy is a form of self-love.
Well, it is. And see, this is exactly to me, it's a wonderful conversation about exactly how it happens in childhood. Childhood happens, and then you grow up, and then you get freedom, and you get to leave home. And guess what you want to do in a few years is start talking. And so you've never talked before because you never could talk before, and it's your family, by the way, or it's the secret, by the way, or it's your dad's best friend next door, by the way. So then you get out of home and you're like, wow, I'm free. I can talk. And then the more you grow, the more you want to talk, which is usually why people begin talking about it in their 30s. So when we think about this is exactly the scenario, Joanne. And because people are like, why didn't you tell? Well, why didn't you tell anybody? And you want to say, okay, seriously, first a child. But these patterns continue because you continue to grow, right?
And also in our 30s, we're finally grown up enough to realize that we have something to do with this process. And we're able
Mhm.
to grab that and realize that we do have the power to change that. Because I've realized, they're always saying, okay, what is your ideal audience? And I'm like, anyone who's been abused. And they're like, no, 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 no. And I'm like, well, what? I abused women. Yes, that's my audience. And they're like, no, you need to have a target audience. And then I finally realized what they were saying is that around the 30s, maybe
Mm,
35, maybe
mhm,
close to 40, you get to that point where you're like, I have to do something about this. And then you start seeking help. You start
mhm.
working in the workbooks and doing, you know, um, counseling and things like that. Yes, and so I understood what they were finally trying to say to me. But yeah, and again, I've always had that still small voice in my head, which I believe to this day to be the Holy Spirit, telling me, no, that's not right. Don't listen to them. Listen to this. This is what's going to guide you the best
Right.
way, and again, honoring that truth and honoring, like I was telling a friend of mine this the other day. I said, okay, so if I call you a car and you go in the garage, does that make you a car? And he said, no. And I said, okay. So it's the same thing. It's the same thing. People will go, that's not true. That's not true. Okay, to you, it's not true.
Mhm.
To me, it's every day of my life. These things are in my head, in my heart, in my memories. Yeah, it's true. But just because you say it's not true doesn't change it.
Well, right. And again, I love to say that you see you because when we're looking at ourselves and taking our eyes off everybody else, because that's God's job. Everybody else is God's job. Your abuser is God's job. Your husband is God's job. Your sister is God's job. Your brother is God's job. So if you see you and you're always focusing on yourself, I think life gets a little bit easier because the only person that we really do have any control over is ourselves. But listening to
Absolutely.
you, I think that the patterns come back to us, right? So now we're in this marriage, we're in our marriage 30 years, these betrayals happen. You don't have to share the betrayals, but these betrayals happen. And I do think sometimes old patterns slip in. I'm just going to not start feeling. I'm going to check out. I'm not going to really feel. I'm not going to really put my foot down and demand. See, if we were seeing ourselves, we might, but then they don't respond. And then it's going to be this constant back and forth. And then the old pattern of I'm just going to put my emotions away. I'm not going to feel. And you kind of go, does that make it? I mean, I do think those patterns come back. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. You go on, autopilot because you can't change it. Like I realized, and I don't, part of that was, this is my second marriage, my third, long-term relationship, and finding out that I couldn't change my ex-husband, and he's also gone as well. He was an alcoholic. He was physically, mentally, emotionally, verbally abusive.
Mhm.
And so I thought I did better this time. And even though I did better in some aspects, there was still woundings and those old feelings of, oh, I can help somebody. I can change them if I just love them enough.
Mhm.
And so,
Right?
yeah, you're like, whatever. You can only change yourself. But
Well, right. Keep going.
when you can't, you just get to that point where you're like, what's the point? You know what I mean? And I knew that I couldn't make it financially on my own. And
Mhm.
so I just thought, well, I'll just stay and I've had worse relationships, and again, but then that clocking out that absolutely like, yeah,
Right.
difficult.
So, see, but to me, because we hear the world talk to survivors and say, well, you never told. Well, and so now you're hearing the same thing. But to me, it's the ultimate same pattern, right? We know how to survive. We know how to go into survival mode. We've been doing it since
Oh,
we were children. You bet I actually know how I should be treated, but I'm not being treated that way here. So I'm going to shut down. I mean, that to me, it's logical. Right? Especially when we're so good at it. Right? And so I don't understand what the hard part of saying, I'm just using tools I know.
yeah, it's what we're used to.
It's what we're
Exactly.
used to.
I can't tell you how many people have said to me, Joann, why don't you ask for help? Joann, why don't you tell somebody? Joann,
Mhm.
and it's because we've ended up going on our own so many times because of
Yes.
the people that
Yes.
say we're not telling the truth, the people that don't believe us, the people that don't want to believe that that person's capable of doing what they did, yada, yada. I mean, there's so many
There's so
scenarios
many.
over why we didn't tell.
Exactly.
But,
Right. And Joanne, you have your chapter 11, I think it is, where, you're now your children go away. Your mother actually is helps them alienate from you. And so they've never been there. And when these patterns are in a life from childhood all the way on, the same thing was true, actually, Joanne. My mother tried to alienate my children for a time. They actually were like, man, should we trust mom? And here she is, my abuser. And she's telling my children to go away from me and not to trust me. So, I mean, that's a huge betrayal after betraying me my whole childhood. Now you're trying to get my kids to change. These are huge things that people don't understand, that when you come from a lifestyle of trauma, really, and you don't ever have comfort, our skills around any territory we're in appear a little bit differently than everybody else's, right?
oh, absolutely. They do.
Yeah, they do. And rightfully so. We are not them. You started with, I was different and I've been different. Now, you and I are both loving, caring people. And and anybody who probably sat next to us would like us. But the truth is, there's an isolation in us that's really that God has to continue to search for in us, because we've been thriving out here by fighting. And that's why I wanted to start this whole talk with Isaiah 40, where he says, I want to call out to you and tell you that your warfare is ended. That's a hard thing to hear for us, isn't it, Joanne? Because, right, here comes another thing in life. It's just ready. I'm ready to fight. Here comes another thing in life. We know how to fight, but to be still and peaceful is a difficult thing. And so, what do you have to say
And
about that?
more so to trust that someone really means it.
Yeah. Yes.
And we are talking about God here, and I know you and I are probably about the same age or within, I
Mhm.
turned 60 in January, and yet I know that I have 60 years of experience proving to me that God is who he says he is, and he will
Mhm.
do what he says he will do. But that old fight, flight, fawn, or there's another
Mhm.
one. Now they've added another one to it, which I can't seem to remember. But anyway, those old feelings are very hard
Mhm.
to shake.
Huge, Joanne, huge.
It's like I know that I am who I am because of God, and I know it's because I trusted him and given
Mhm.
my heart to him, and I do
Mhm.
believe that he is that. But I also know that that he is in heaven, and even though he's with us, he's not here. And you and I both know that we have had to go it alone so many times, and maybe that is because of a fear of not trusting. I know that's huge for me. And once you've lost my trust, man, everything else follows. That's it. And and it's like, look, I'll be kind to you because that's who I am, but I won't trust you. I won't give you
Mhm.
the opportunity to hurt me ever again. I mean, and I'm not like cut and dried with that. Like I give and I give and I give and I give and I give, and then I'm like, okay, dude, I'm done, and then I'm out. You know what I mean? And like I
Right.
said, we were married for 30 years, 20 of it, where but and the thing is the more you lose my trust, the less there is for you to ever gain back. And that's basically what it is. And
Right.
and again, that knowing that you and I both have been scrappers and we can make it on our own, so we don't need people,
Mhm.
which it's that's big too. I mean,
Well, it is big, but it's exhausting. And so what people don't understand is when you're in a relationship that you really do want to leave and probably should leave, I think it's really important that we talk about this for a minute because I think a lot of abused people find themselves there, Joanne. And then people are like, oh, you're kidding. That happened? Yeah, that happened. And the other thing is when we learn to trust ourselves, I don't really give a shit what you think about me anymore because I trust who I am and I'm doing what I need to do for myself. And I think I love AA has this saying that says, what you think about me is none of my business. And I live by that. You know what I mean? And I love that because the stronger and the older I get, there's this inner fortitude. I remember my grandmother told me, Svisby, it's a Finnish thing. And for you Finnish people, I'm sure I said it wrong, but she was 100% Finnish and it means inner fortitude. And I've seen it other places since then. But when I was a child, I'd never seen it anywhere. Well, actually, I was a teenager. And she said, sweetheart, you have this. So there are people that have this inner fortitude. However, that doesn't mean that we don't want to fall down sometimes, that we really want to trust sometimes. And it doesn't mean that we don't stay in relationships that we should get out of, right?
yeah. I've always had that inner fortitude, like you said. I don't know how you said it, but anyway, yes, definitely.
Hmm.
I've always had that. And the thing is like, I think that, again, going back to that knowing, ourselves
Hmm.
and standing up for ourselves. And again, boundaries are so
Hmm.
incredibly hard because we have to choose to
Hmm.
honor ourselves. And it's only through us holding on to that strength that we have that we're able to do that. But, I think that a lot of times the abuse makes us question ourselves.
Oh, absolutely, it does. And then when people don't
It's
believe us,
second guess. And then, you're
yes.
like, again, I don't know too many people that have gone through the type of things that we've gone through that aren't able to say, dude, I know what I've been through. I know my story. And whether you believe it or not, it isn't going to change. You may not like it, it may make you uncomfortable, but my story doesn't change just because you don't like it. Now, as a younger girl, I began to think, did
Mhm.
I just like, did I dream this up? Is it a bad dream? And then at some point in time, your spirit checks and you're like, no,
Well, and
no.
I love that. I love that we always, when we talk, we touch on these things. When you're young, I think a lot of people, if you have a notion that you were abused. Because people that weren't abused don't say, I think I was abused. Because the truth is, your mind, your body, there's all of these things that are coming back to you all the time in your life. But you've got to check into them because what we usually do is think, that's some crazy fog memory that I had. There's no way that I had to go down on my mom, or there's no way that, my brother raped me when my room was blue. And so we deny it and we allow that fog to stay in there. But you're right, Joanne, as you get older, you just learn you actually don't step into who you are until all of a sudden you say, that's my story. Man, it sucks. and nobody's going to want to hear this, but fuck you guys, I'm telling it anyway, because this is who I am. And I was a victim. And I do get angry at that because nobody really is like, I got this message on LinkedIn today, and somebody found my book that used to work with me. And he said, Jody, I can't believe that's who you, is this your story? Because man, I always respected you. Now I honor you. That's a beautiful thing to hear at 60, Joanne. But what about the other, 40 years 50 years that we lived with absolutely no support? Because now I'm strong and saying, I don't care what you think of me. I had a cousin call me flipping out the other day about, don't you dare say anything. You know what? I believe her father was there. Her father was there the night of that murder. I want to know if they know something. I have the right to ask. There's a dead woman. But see, all of these things, people are like, you need to shut up. No, I don't. No, I don't. You have no right to tell me anything. So, the same thing is true for you, Joanne, but it wears on us that why can't people just be kind and say, wow, I'm really sorry you went through that. In the end. Why do they have to add their 2 cents? What do you think that is? That 2 cents they
I
add?
think that it makes them so doggone uncomfortable that they, I don't know, and a lot of times I think, because I've heard it, oh gosh, so many times, don't talk to me about that. No, no, that didn't happen
Mm-hmm.
to you. Think that either they are hiding the fact that they were,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't know anything about it, which I pray that that's true. But I do believe that there are more victims out there than they actually say that there
Oh,
are.
100%. Only 1 in 9. 1 in 9 report. 1 in 9
I, okay, only 1 in 9 report.
report.
That's true.
Yeah, no, they
But
say that's actually, yeah. So the numbers are times 9. So if you have 60 million people, do that times 9, because 1 in 9 report, they say. And I think that's true because people do not report. I wish everybody listening would call and report, because if you did, it would make our justice system have to listen, because they love saying, oh, I know there's millions of you, but there's not really anything we can do. And bless the heart of those prosecutors that do. But I'm telling you, they hate these cases. They don't like to have them. I wish everybody would call, not even for you. If you're 60, still call, because if that pedophile is alive, protect the people behind you. Okay, go ahead, Joanne.
I have to tell you what happened when I did finally report at the age of 18. So when my mother found out about what happened, because I busted 2 men and put them behind bars, and my mom was always like, "What do you have to talk
Good
about? Why do you
girl.
have to?" And I was like, "Well, because it happened to me." And then she freaked out. My dad came downstairs. He left 3 hours early to go find the 2 guys that I told him about that molested me at the age of 5. And thank God he didn't find either one of them, because I know my dad would have been in prison for murder. And so my mom, made me go and talk to a prosecutor and somebody, the police officers and whatever. And the officers literally said to me, because of your state, I had given birth to one child, I was pregnant with another one. There wouldn't be any way to tell that it had actually happened to you. And it would be his word against your word. That's why people don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people don't tell.
You're
And then
exactly right.
when I did report my aunt's husband and testified, the prosecuting attorney said to me, "So, Miss Hall, my maiden name at the time, is it true that the reason why you reported your uncle for touching you is because you were molested before and you hate men?"
Oh
This was
my
on the same,
goodness.
I was 12, 13 freaking years old.
Oh
And
my god. And you
no, I
hate
don't hate
men.
my uncle. And I never referred to him as my uncle, because I'm sorry, uncles don't touch their nieces and nephews. But anyway,
Right.
I said, I do not hate my uncle. I hate what he was doing to people and what happened to me. Like, I was a pretty smart ass little chick at that time, because I was pissed off. Who the hell
Right.
thinks to ruin a child's childhood? And I don't even know if you want to go down this road, but when I heard about one of the stars and what they said, I was like, oh, mm.
Now say that
And
again. You're welcome to talk about that. I didn't catch what you were saying.
so I had overheard that Oprah Winfrey had said on a national publication that when you are touching a child, it shouldn't hurt if you do it the right way.
Oh, right. No, you should
And I'm
want it or
like,
something. I heard her talk about that too. I think
did you
this
ever
is
ask?
just an opinion of mine, but I think that she's made a lot of money in the pedophile industry. I don't know. just
I'm
as
pretty sure
where there's
if I have,
smoke, there's fire, and I'm suspect of that woman. Even
yeah,
though,
yeah,
she did a lot, and it's sad to me that I think she did a lot. And of course, we can't really know, but it does seem like where there's smoke, there's fire. And it's that interview was not cool. She brought all those pedophiles together and she's like, well, a good pedophile is going to make you want it. Now, not when you're little. They're not. By the way, Oprah, it hurts like a motherfucker.
yeah.
They're not going to make you want it. I'm sorry. But that was almost a dark kind of glossing this over with, sometimes, yeah, you can enjoy it, but it's still really icky. I mean, yeah, if you talk to any child, that is just disgusting. And it was
Your body does respond favorably because those type of things typically, when done
right,
adult, are pleasurable. So yes, your body betrays you, and then you end up hating yourself
right. And
because of
that's
that.
very true. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, their sexuality is very twisted as a result of that because now, right, you have to have, drunk, dark sex or, whatever. It's hard just to have or no sex. Some people become absolutely frigid. So it really does destroy many parts of it. But it's funny, I didn't like how she presented that either. It made it almost lustful or whatever when this is a crime. They shouldn't even have had their time. I mean, I don't know what good that did. That I didn't like that panel myself either. Because number one, you're not going to interview evil and get any good kind of answer from evil. It's evil, period.
So true. Yeah.
Right. So, I think the thing that we need to remember too is that healing is a lifelong journey and it's okay to not be okay. We hear that, but the truth is, I have really good weeks and then sometimes I don't have that good of a week. And then I know how now I have tools to get back on the road. But life is not a dress rehearsal, and we get to live it the way we want to live it, right? Sometimes I have too much wine, then sometimes I don't drink for a long time anymore. That's really a really healed way to live for me. I mean, I used to get drunk every night, 6 nights a week, because I didn't want to have bad dreams. I was scared. I used it as this protection shield thing. Well, I don't have to do that anymore, and I'm thankful for it. It's nobody's business how I live, Joanne.
Well, and actually, I completely understand. And as a widow, coping with the loneliness, I was drinking quite regularly, and I thought, no, you've made a habit out of this, and you don't need it. And so I recently quit again. Besides that, when you're older, it's harder than hell to get up the next day and have any energy when you do that dumb stuff.
Well,
So
that's
yeah,
that old country song, "Hangovers hurt more now than they used to."
I that's so unfair, And what sucks is I just bought a brand new bottle and I'm like, okay, so now you're not drinking anymore. But I know, it's a choice. And, we have to choose to do what's best for our bodies. And when your kidneys
Right.
are screaming the next day, you're like, okay, we're done. It's not
Right.
helping.
Well, and my
Okay.
point is that's an easy thing, but I think, to have grace with ourselves as we grow, and it's okay to not be okay, right? Because it's
Oh, and that is the way it is. And when you're uncomfortable, then you're more than willing to work on that. And and you are choosing to do the work and put that in, and when you're uncomfortable, that just means that you need to start moving again into whatever it is that you need to start processing and working through.
right.
And I
And
have
yep, go ahead.
then change. I used to hate change. It would drive me crazy. It would give me anxiety, and I would
Right.
end up in the bathroom because my stomach was upset from change. But now I've realized that the only thing that's constant is change,
It's so
and now
true.
I find beauty in it.
Right?
The fact that we can evolve, we can grow, we can say, I used to believe this and now I don't. And and we can continue to grow and evolve. I think that's what it's about, is evolving. You know what I mean? Um, just watching, I mean, one of my supervisors said to me, Joann, if you could see how much change I've seen in you. And I said, no. I said, if you could see how much change I've seen in me, you would be
Mhm.
blown away. I mean, it's beautiful that you noticed it, but when I think
Mhm.
about the changes in me and the fact that you can
Right.
sit here and you can slam me all you want to, you can say all the terrible things you want to about me, you shouldn't be talking about this, you shouldn't, whatever, you blah, 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 blah. And I am just like, I see nothing but pride. I see nothing but strength. I see nothing but that inner fortitude that says, you know what? I'll make it regardless of what happens. I will make it because that's who I am.
See, and that's beautiful. And one of the things to remember for anybody listening, and if you are in an abusive, I don't think Joanne was talking about severe abuse in her marriage, but if you are in an abusive relationship, remember that you can get out. You don't have to stay because often we do go in these patterns of solitude, put our tools away, put our emotions down, and we just stay stuck. So don't stay stuck. I love that. And actually, I wanted to spend the little bit of time we have left talking about chapter 29. She talks about what's helped me. And in here, I love it. You talk about counseling, you talk about journaling, writing it out, talking with friends, which we're doing tonight, going to the beach, music, which I use all the time. So talk to me in these last minutes that we have together about, your husband's past. You're opening up about some betrayals and some feelings of loneliness and dark times in your marriage, which I'm sure anybody that's married can relate with. Talk to me about those things that you're using now to cope with as you go forward, because that's how you ended your book, which was so beautiful.
Well, first of all, I'd like to plug the fact that I've created a workbook and a journal
Awesome.
book based upon my book, and it just gives you guided questions to help you through. So, not everybody's trauma is the same, but I still wanted to give the
Hmm.
reader the opportunity to have a book and a journal in one that can help them, ask those tough questions. Who
Hmm.
was your who was your offender? What happened to you? Have you healed from these things? And right now, I am in a huge state of journaling and collaging. I am a licensed collage therapist, so I can guide you through collaging. And it's just trusting your mind. So you have to get outside of your heart and you have to go because your mind knows more than your heart knows. And you have to step aside and allow. So you go through magazines and you pick pictures out, and I just made one of the most beautiful collages about grief
No,
and
that's
about the,
cool.
and I showed it on my Facebook page. But the thing is if you step aside, because what's going to happen is you're going to pick out a picture or a phrase or a word, and your heart's going to go, that's not true. And your mind's going to go, step back. I got this. And then you put these things together, but they read like a freaking book. I mean, it's just
I
so
bet.
I literally I could show you 20, 30, 40 of them. And when I first heard about it, I was like, you can't do that. That's art. You can't do that as therapy. And then I did one and it was like, holy crap, what the heck? It's like and I don't believe in this, but it's kind of like a tarot reader or a gypsy telling you your story. It's kind of like that underground. It's the Holy Spirit, is you're using the Holy Spirit to unearth these things. And I'm not kidding. It literally goes, I look at them and I'm like, holy crap, wow, how did that happen? You know what I mean? But I
Hmm.
trusted my body to to be gravitating towards those things that I'm not willing to admit to myself, maybe even. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's really a beautiful process. The other thing that I've turned to is my art. Um, and I still have three more books in my head, plus a child's book, which is completed. I just need to find somebody to illustrate it. And writing, journaling, really
No,
talking
that's
about things.
cool.
Well, and the thing is you have to be honest with yourself about what's
Hmm.
happening. And like I said, Randy, I don't believe he ever cheated on me, but he preferred porn. And it's a lazy man's way of taking care of his own needs. And it just split the chasm between us. To me, that's cheating when you are,
Hmm.
looking at,
Oh,
and
it feels like rejection. I had a husband. I've had a few husbands, but I had a husband that I walked in and he was uh, porn and him, and it was really an awful feeling. We didn't stay married very long, but it's a
well,
terrible feeling,
and not only that, but it really made me doubt who I was as a woman.
right? That's what I'm saying. You feel rejected, don't you?
Yeah. I
Yeah,
felt like something was wrong with me.
exactly.
a plus size woman, that the world doesn't always prefer curves.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah.
No, I think that it's hugely affects your worth as a woman when, your man is doing porn. I totally get that. And even cheating, my first husband I was married to for 18 years, he cheated on me all the time. And then when I left him, I got men that cheated. And I finally learned that cheating wasn't about me. It was about them. And porn wasn't about you, Joanne. It was about him.
But it
And
took so long to get to that point where you realize that, but it
oh,
doesn't
so
make
long,
it any less. You know what I'm
right?
saying?
Oh, for
Because then you're,
years I didn't eat and worked out, thinking if I just look better, he won't, that. And it wasn't about me. It never was about me. It was all about him. And, that's the thing about UCU. If had I been not looking at him so much and looking at myself during those years, me and my children wouldn't have received all of the brutal treatment from him that we got. But all I did was look at him because people often that have been abused as children just, it's like you just hand this blank check to someone and say, here I am, take everything you want.
yeah.
Oh, here, you forgot some. Here, take this too. And we don't
Yeah,
have
the other
anything left.
about abused people is you are so busy with your peripheral that it's
Yes,
hard to focus back where it belongs. And again, that was one of those things I learned in my first marriage. It had nothing to do with me because at that point with my first marriage, my husband always was cheating on me with chubby women. So I'm like, wait a minute. Something's I gotta see this. I gotta see this. And then I realized that it really had nothing to do with me, my body,
mhm,
my you know, um,
exactly.
but it took a while to get that. And we were only married for, well, we lived together for 7 years. We were married for 9. And at the ninth, somebody said, get your divorce before he goes for it. And then you'll lose everything because they listen to the person who files. And so, anyway, it took that. But, still after years and years of it, it does wear you down and it beats you
It
down to
does.
a point where you're just like, what's the freaking point?
Hmm.
What's you know and that's where I was in my marriage. And like I said, my husband was a good man. He helped everyone. He was but I just could not deal with that anymore, and I didn't have the belief in myself.
Hmm.
And so I just stayed. And the other thing is too, and this sounds very selfish, but I am the one that wanted us to buy our house. And I'm the one that devised the plan to make our credit good so that we could. And I'm like, I'm not going to lose my investment. And so, anyway,
Right. No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry to hear that that happened in your relationship. Relationships are complicated. People are complicated. God is so good. I'm so thankful to have him in my life and understand grace because I need grace every day, right? And his mercies are new every morning. But I am sorry, just friend to friend. I'm really sorry to hear that you struggled with that because I know I have been attacked a lot in my life with men cheating and pornography. And, I always pick these just kind of broken men sexually. So, well, broken men in many ways. I feel like I'm doing a whole lot better in this marriage and I'm really happy. But you know what? There is no perfect marriage, but I am sorry that you went through that because it really is, it debilitates a woman's self-worth. And we fight. It's hard enough being a woman that's come through sexual childhood crimes. That's a tragedy that we try to get out of our souls that's a hard thing to overcome. It really is. Unless you just continue to play the vixen game, right? And then you're just out there catting around, as my dad used to say. But when you're trying to live a good, wholesome life, gets a little more complicated, I think. So, anyway, Joanne, we are at time. This has been so wonderful being with you. I'd like to always give back the last few minutes to my guests just to say if there's anything on your heart you'd like to share before we go.
oh man, just we have to work so hard to find that faith and belief in ourselves and give yourself some credit. Like, believe in yourself. I mean, and everyone, I believe, regardless of whether they believe it or not, or they believe in Christ, we all have a purpose.
Mhm.
And until you're living that purpose out, you're not going to be very happy. But I also believe that the happiness that we're seeking for needs to come from the inside out. And you can't find it in a man, you can't find it in a bottle, you can't find it in a needle, you can't find it in any of those other ways. And until you are truly happy with yourself, um, you aren't going to be very happy in life in general. And it's not something that you can attain by getting that car, getting that house, getting that job. Again, it's an internal thing. And, like I said, I've spent many years, seeking it in relationships, seeking it in a bottle, seeking it in, and I'm genuinely pleased with the person that I've developed and grown to become. And I still have a lot of change to go through. And I know that this new journey is a journey about um, finding the me that I've lost
Mhm.
through serving everybody else but me. And that sounds really selfish, but you know what? It's
No. Yeah, no, it's not.
I mean, I really wish that I would have realized some of the things. I have no regrets. I really have no regrets. Because everything that you go through is a learning lesson. And but it depends on how you're willing to apply those learning lessons. And if you do, and if you apply the learning lessons and realize that those things are for the betterment of you, like, everything that you go through, like, um my mom and I got into this conversation and we never spoke about the abuse that happened until she was really, really ill. And she asked me if I was okay with what happened to me, the sexual abuse at a very young age, and everything through that. And I looked at her and I said, "You know what, Mom? I am." And she was like, "What?" And she was really visibly offended by that. And I said, "How would I know what my cousins had gone through if I hadn't experienced it myself? How would
Exactly.
I be sympathetic and empathetic and caring? I wouldn't. My little, bud would have stayed tightly, and sometimes, I can't lie, and I'm pretty sure you could say I wish that I'd have had an opportunity not to live through the things that I did. But the
Oh,
bottom line is,
sure. Oh, sure, I'd say that.
but we didn't get that opportunity to choose
Right.
that.
Right.
And I think that makes us really big badass warriors. And but on
Hmm.
this weekend, we managed to keep that kindness in our hearts. We managed to keep that loving, open. I mean, for those of us who've been through what we've been through, the desire to shut your heart down and say, screw it, I'm not doing this ever again.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
recently fell in love with a man, and then he proved that he wasn't worthy of
Oh,
it.
I'm
But
sorry.
I still believe that my one true love is out there, and I'm not giving up. I
Right.
didn't get the way that I was, but I learned something, and I'm going to just hold on to that and continue.
And you know what, Joanne, oh my gosh, I go back through my life looking for love, and I really am in love in this marriage. And, but I can just tell you so many times I picked wrong, but there's signs. And when you see those signs, it's just right to go. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's so cool. It was really funny. I just have to share this story. I remember meeting this person. You know how people say, "Well, you really need to stay alone for 1 year and grieve or whatever, and learn, and then go out and find someone." So I knew this person that did it, and I said, "So how'd that work for you?" And he's like, "It didn't." I ended up, you know what I mean? So there is no formula. I think it's wonderful that you went out and dated and you tried. I think, take care of you, keep seeing yourself when you see those flags. That's wonderful. And you
And
know
I
what? It's beautiful though to be soft and actually feel. I cry more than I've ever cried in my whole life. I don't know if it's getting old. I don't know what it is,
know,
but
you
it's
know, I
okay.
but the thing is, like I said, when you don't have those walls up, you are
Yes,
that person. And
I'm totally different.
I still haven't found the man that can take me out of my masculine. I mean, I thought I did, and there were some parts of it, but I'm looking forward to that time when I find a man that's strong, that can say, here, rest on me. And in the meantime, I know that I have that in God. And it's
Right.
hard trust, but anyway, yeah,
No, it is. I remember my aunt used to say when in my dating years, I was single for 13 years and I used to date, and she'd say, well, dotes, when they leave, you have their balls in your hands. I'm like, well, then they shouldn't have given them to me. So
right.
I have since changed. I continue to grow. I stayed in counseling for 20 years, but it always cracked me up. And my answer was like, well, then don't give them to me. So it's the same thing because you know, the strength it takes to survive and be us, and the daily occurrence of the strength it takes to be us. There's no other way to say it, actually. And that's a daily thing. You know what? I have to have somebody that's strong next to me, and I need somebody that I can't just push over. And I also needed somebody that wouldn't lie to me. A lot of people are dishonest. I'm stunned how many people are dishonest. I had people flat out lie. I had one husband. This is terrible, but I'm just honest. What I mean, I don't care what you think about me. I'm here to help and let us all be honest. But I had my third husband said he was a meth addict, and we had promised each other to never lie. And his son called me. It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and he said, "Dad's lying to you, Jody. He's doing meth." And I was so heartbroken because I really believed my kids were going to do an intervention because my daughter, having a drug history, knew. But I drank, but I never did drugs, so I didn't know what to look for. Anyway, I guess all of this to say, be graceful to yourself, right? And let God restore your soul. I love the Psalms 23, he restores my soul. I pray that often in the mornings because I need that work in me constant because I fall back to fear and guilt and shame and condemnation and all those ugly places that do not belong in the kingdom of God. And so be good to yourself this week. I love you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your honesty. It actually brings out honesty in me because the one thing that a survivor's got on their side is honesty. And you guys use it as a weapon because it's a beautiful tool to have in your tool belt. So, you know what, Father, restore people out there. Blessings over Joanne, extra safety to her this week. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Bye bye.
Joanne. Good night.